Welcome to this episode of Consider It Blacklit. I am Kim Singleton, your host, and for those of you tuning in for the first time, Consider It Blacklit highlights films, television programs, and stage plays featuring African Americans up front and behind the scenes. We also discuss social issues as it relates to some of these programs and how they may or may not impact our communities. So thank you for tuning in, and we hope you continue to tune in each week. Today, it is my pleasure to highlight the 1976 classic film, Car Wash. Car Wash takes a comedic look at a day in the life of employees working at a Los Angeles car wash. It has an ensemble cast of my favorite actors, comedians, and entertainers. In it includes Ivan Dixon, Bill Duke, Richard Pryor, Franklin Ajaye, Garrett Morris, Tracy Reed, Antonio Fargas, and the Pointer Sisters, and many, many more. Let's take a look at the trailer.
They still do it by hand at Mr. B's.
Morning, Mr. B.
Morning, Snapper.
Only determination,
Got the big three.
dedication, and a tough crew of men can get the job done.
Stand and deliver, honey.
They've got a sharp boss who always has control of the situation. They've got teamwork.
Hi, I'm Clyde. Ho! And I'm Lloyd. And we're the Futurists.
And most of all, they've got the will to work.
I don't want you to leave here without realizing what I can do for your car.
Like what? Take over the payments for me?
This is the wet and wild world of the car wash, a business a man can be proud of,
I want to work with the men, Dad.
where the only rule is do it with style. It's hard work, because sooner or later, everyone comes through here.
Did you happen to see a big, tall, black, blonde chick here with
Big black blonde
red
chick?
boots?
Listen, I'd like to talk to someone and get some information about a social disease.
Hey, brothers, I'm here to unite with you.
Hey, baby, how you doing? Good, I'm glad to hear that.
Between the washing and the cleaning, there's always room for dreaming that the next car through might be the answer to your prayers.
Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord.
Well, praise this car, honey.
Thank you, miss.
But one thing is certain, when it comes to serving the public, these men will stop at nothing. George Carlin, Professor Irwin Corey, Ivan Dixon, Lorraine Gary, Jack Kehoe, the Pointer Sisters, Richard Pryor. They all come together at the fabulous, freewheeling Soap Suds and Emporium, where everything goes.
Boy, there's been some weird people in here today.
Car Wash.
It is my pleasure to have a guest to discuss this movie because she loves it just as much as I do. A dear friend, Inez Brown. Welcome, Inez.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm happy to be here. And as you see, I'm smiling because whenever I hear the movie Car Wash, I smile.
Yes.
I've seen it many, many moons ago, but it still makes me smile.
Yes, it makes me smile too.
Yes.
But before we start talking about Car Wash, I'd like my audience to know who my guests are. So why don't you tell our audience who you are and what you do?
My name is Inez Brown, and I'm an artist. I say that with such affirmation because at this point in my life, I've just decided to step into my artistry 100%. I spent all of my professional career as a cutest nerd ever. I spent many years developing as a programmer, moved up the ranks, became a manager, and then I went into higher ed, where I had the opportunity to work with so many students, and I really enjoyed doing that. But for this next chapter in my book of life, I am stepping into my artistry. So I'm really doing all sorts of things to sort of develop my artistry. I've always been an artist. You can ask all of my siblings. I've always been in that space. And so I think all of the things that I've done in my life to this point have really sort of just affirmed for me that I am an artist. And you know, I've been gifted. I believe, I know that it is a gift because so many things come to me so easily in terms of a creative space. And I realize not everyone can do that. And so I'm treating it as the gift that God has given me, and I'm looking forward to that journey.
What better person to talk about car wash than an artist?
Right, right, because we get to see and explore elements of the movie that many people might have missed.
Exactly,
Yes,
exactly.
yes.
So let me ask you this. When was the first time you saw Car Wash, and what was your reaction to it?
It's funny you ask, because I know I'd seen it, right? So I have a sister, Denise, who is a movie buff, and I had to call her. I said, what year did we see it? She says, well, I was in 9th grade and you were in 6th grade. So I was like, okay, that's good enough for me. And we kind of laughed about that last night. So it's been I was a preteen, so I wasn't even a teenager yet. And so for me to see it again as an adult really just showed a totally different lens. You know, there's so many things that I didn't pay attention to as a preteen. Those weren't in the purview of my life, even though they were happening in the world. But it was really interesting to look at it now as an adult and see some of the stories in the movie that I may not have picked up on as a child.
I found it very interesting. You had brought this up before, that it was a multicultural cast.
Yes.
But when you look at the trailer, you're going to see they highlight the white performers in it. So back in 1976, I'm assuming the producers thought that that would be a sell. But it really focused on, you know,
Us.
people
People of color.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it was so exciting for those of us who were really young, because at that time we weren't very prevalent in movie theaters or on big screens. So to see a bunch of us together having a good time, the music was great, you know, it just created an environment where you found it really enjoyable.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of the characters. The main character for me was Lonnie, played by Ivan Dixon.
Okay.
He seemed to be, I want to say, the father figure at the car wash, but he had a bunch of layers to him because he was an
Yes.
ex-con.
Yes.
Tell us your thoughts on his character.
So it's interesting you say father figure, because that was my interpretation of his role, even before you knew in the movie that he had a situation with the law, that he served time in jail. He seemed to be the glue to keep all of the guys kind of in order. You know, keep the harmony in the group, because you had so many different characters in the group and they each played a very specific role, but I saw him as the father figure and the glue to keep everybody together and on track and focused on work. You know, he realized and he understood the need to have some joy and laughter in the workday, but he was also about getting the work done. You know, and he was committed to his family. And you could tell that when they introduced his 2 kids, you know, it was like, okay, he's a dad. He's a real dad, and he's committed to them and making their life better through his life choices.
Right.
You know.
And that's what I liked about his character, that even though he had some trouble with the law, he was still committed as a
Yes,
family man,
he
and he
was.
was there to better the life of his family.
And that's
So,
always good to see, right? Because I think so many times black men are written out of the picture as being responsible, committed fathers. And we know that that's not the truth. So it was nice to see that even way back then, right? Back in the 70s.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I love Ivan Dixon because this seemed to be in the latter part of his career. Many of the audience may not know that he was he played in Hogan's Heroes.
Okay, no, I did not know that.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
used to watch that as a kid.
He is the
Wow.
black guy in Hogan's Heroes.
Wow.
Yeah, and also he did this fabulous film with Abby Lincoln called Nothing But a Man. So,
Okay.
yeah, those are, you know, always check those out. So,
Okay.
you know, to see him in this role, and both of those other roles were much different than
Okay.
what he's doing, you know, what he did in Car Wash. But it was good to see him.
It was
good to see him
yeah.
there.
And he was very cool, just very
Yeah,
cool and
yeah.
confident, and I like to see that.
Yeah, and I liked his voice. It had this
Yes.
little rasping.
Yes.
It's kind of sexy.
Yes.
Okay. I'm not mad at Ivan. Okay, let's talk about Bill Duke's character.
Okay.
I had read somewhere that this was his first feature film performance.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. We know his repertoire of work, right?
Exactly.
Amazing.
Because he
Amazing.
went on to be a great producer, director, and
Right.
actor, of course.
Great.
Tell me what you thought of his character. He was Abdullah. He was the
Yes.
militant one.
He was the militant, but you have to understand the 70s to understand. I think he was conflicted. He understood the power of having a traditional job and being able to support himself and his family, perhaps. But he also wanted to probably be a part of the Black Power movement. You know, and during the 60s and 70s, there was still this essence of us really learning how to love ourselves and stand in our own truths despite the societal, ills and what was being imposed on us. And so I think he was struggling with that. He knew he needed to work and do what he needed to do, but he found some sense of power in connecting to the Black Power movement. And, you know, that was to be expected. And I think it was a time trying to figure out who you are and how you fit into this society, you know. And I think that he struggled with that. Yeah. Even to the point where he was going to rob the car wash, right? That was a really bad decision, but he was thinking money. He's like, okay, well, if they fire me, well, then I'm going to rob you. Instead of saying, okay, they fired me, let me figure out what else I could do. But Papa of them all saved him, right? Yeah. So I think his role was very authentic and that it was real. It was real for the times, and understanding those times. You understood his mindset.
Right. And I think that's a good point that you brought up, the fact that he was conflicted. Because you live in a society where you have to work to pay your bills, to raise your family, but you see the injustices, you see the unfairness, and you want to speak up about it, but at the same time, the powers that be won't allow you to. Right. So you understood what drove him to try to rob the car wash.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's talk about Marlene's character, the prostitute. That was like such a very sad character.
Yes.
She came on the scene and she was just looking for Joe.
Right.
Right. Give us your perspective on
So
her
it's
character.
interesting you say sad. That was my first interpretation of her whole character, because the first introduction in the movie, she was in the back of a cab and she looked sad. Like she had gone through some things and was just trying to figure it out. But then when she snuck out of the cab, you're like, oh yeah, something's definitely going on, because she didn't have the money to pay for a cab. And so her whole countenance was sad. And I don't know who Joe was. I could say that I think Joe was someone she had met at some point in her lifetime, probably as a prostitute who may have promised her a better life, something more. And so that was probably her glimmer of hope in all of her darkness. I've got to find Joe, because Joe is going to help me get out of this space.
Right.
And unfortunately, in the end, we never got to see Joe or meet Joe, but she was still looking.
She was still looking. And I thought it was interesting because throughout the day, she caught the eye of the character Hippo.
Yes.
And she ended up, you know, charging him for her services.
Yes. She provided Hippo with services. Yes, she did.
But at the end, I don't know if you caught that, you know, at the end of the day when he was leaving, she kind of said, you know, goodbye to him, almost wishing
that it was more.
That it was more. So that's why her character made me feel even sadder for her, because even though she was a prostitute, she was looking for that man to rescue her.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I can't imagine that space, you know, being in that space, and she was sad about it, you know, but I think she felt it was her only way.
Right. And it made me wonder what her backstory was. Like, how did she become a prostitute?
Yeah, what happened?
But that was too deep.
Yeah, that was too deep.
This
was
a
car
comedy.
Wash.
They
just, I think it was reality. And they were like, okay, we're going to throw in this dose of reality, but we don't necessarily give you the happy ending you want.
Right.
You know, because that is reality too. Sometimes you get a happy ending, sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
You know?
So 2 fun facts about Maureen, the prostitute. She's played by Lauren Jones, but she's also married to the director Michael Schultz, who is, I love him, and we're going to do another whole show on him, because he also directed Cooley High.
Oh, wow. Classic.
And Grease Lightning with Richard Pryor. Okay. So that was his wife. The other fun fact I read was that the area they were in, there were really prostitutes there. And they had approached her because they thought she was a real prostitute, like trying to take over their territory. And the crew had to kind of come in and say, wait a minute, we're doing a movie.
That's funny. See, I said it had to be real, right?
Yeah,
they were
had to
putting
be real.
elements of real life in there.
So another plot line in there was the relationship between Franklin Ajaye's character, what was his name? TC.
And Mona.
Yeah, and Mona, Tracy Reed's character.
Right.
I loved how he pursued her.
I did too.
Yeah. So talk to us about that. What you thought about the relationship.
So it's interesting because he was probably one of my favorite characters, because I think it was the big afro. He was so smooth in his approach, and he was very lighthearted. You know, he didn't seem to have the stressors that some of the other men in the car wash had. And he was focused on winning this competition, you know, so that whole energy about him was kind of fun and light. but he was serious about Mona. And I loved how they did the music. When she came onto the scene in the little pink outfit, and the music slowed down, and all he could see was Mona. It was really funny. And so you knew his passion or intensity for this woman. We didn't know the connection at the time. I was like, oh, maybe it's his girlfriend. But it wasn't. He was pursuing her. But he was very intentional about pursuing her. And I respect that, right? And I think she liked him.
But they did, if you picked up, because it was little thing, because, you know, when I saw the movie, I picked up on a lot of things that I didn't pick up before. They had gone out before.
Okay.
And, because she mentioned, she's like, we did this already,
Right,
TC.
right, we're not doing this. That's right,
Yeah,
she sure did. And it's so funny because when she heard him calling her from across the street, she slowed down her walk. So I was like, oh yeah, she's showboating for him, but yet she would give him the time of day. And I think in her mind, she was reaching for something higher. She didn't want a guy who was in the car wash, even though he was a hardworking guy. In her mind, she felt like that wasn't enough. But in the end, that shifted because he kind of gave her an ultimatum. And he's like, okay, I've chased you enough. Either you're going to go out with me or I'm moving on. And then she thought about it. But I think the whole dynamics of them was really interesting. It's a dance. You know, we know about dating and men and women, you play a dance, right? Yeah, but in the end, they got to dance together, I think.
Yeah, well, he won me over when he started singing to her in the diner. Come on.
It immediately takes you back.
In this chair, waiting on you.
Oh, baby, to see things my way.
I love that song.
And it's so funny, you can hear that song. You don't hear it often. You kind of have to intentionally play it. But when you do, it just takes me back in time. Space in my life. I was young. Not too many kids in the world, going to school, doing your homework. But yeah.
Another storyline was Leon Pinkney played Justin and his girlfriend, Loretta, who was played by Ren Woods. I loved her too. Loretta was trying to get him to go back to school or go to school, but he didn't want to. He just wanted to work.
Right.
Let's talk about like why a black man back in the 1970s may choose to try to make money instead of bettering himself.
I think it was about feeling unempowered in society. It's like, I don't see the benefit of, because you have to put in your time and energy. You and I both know we're college graduates. We understand the commitment, the time and the effort it takes to be successful in college. And I don't think his mindset was there. And it's hard to stay at a space where your mindset is not supporting you in that journey. So for him, he's like, no, I need to make some money. And so I don't know what his end result, what his end goal was, because he talked about money. But realistically, how much money would you make in a car wash, you know? But I think for him, he felt it was like, no, I want to be in charge of my own destiny. And right here, right now is what I'm doing to make some money. You can go to college, I won't be able to make any money. I'm going to wind up owing money, right? But he didn't understand the value of a college degree at that space, in that moment. And I think she really loved him. And she wanted him to achieve certain things. And she could see, because she had completed her degree, but trying to pull him along, you know, I think that was her greatest challenge. But she didn't want to leave him because of it, because she threatened to leave, and she's like, I'm out. But
she
then,
left,
of course,
but she came back.
Yeah, she came back.
And he seemed to
be amenable when she came back. Because he's like, okay, maybe I'll think about it or give this thing a try.
Right. So we're going to hope he went back to college.
Right. I hope we're going to say he did, and maybe he went to Howard.
Yep, maybe he went to Howard. Ain't you?
Ain't you know?
You know, I would love to see a car wash part 2. Not the car wash that they tried to do before, because it just took away, but just like a follow-up on
what happened to them.
And the characters. I think that would have been an added, like, little spice to it. You know how at the end of movies they say, so-and-so went on to do that. I think that would have been nice. You know, Leon went on to, Lonnie went on to own the car wash.
Right. Or TC and Mona got married. Or he went back to school. I mean, there were so many stories you could tell. But I wonder why there wasn't a part 2. And maybe perhaps at that time, we didn't have movies that came in parts, right? We were lucky to get a movie that we could appreciate and see ourselves. So maybe the thoughts for the movie were this big, and they really could have been this big.
Right. And at the end of the day, the studios control it, and they're just looking at dollar signs. They didn't care about what we wanted.
What we wanted, right,
part
because we
two.
were kind of not being considered, right?
Right, exactly. Which leads me to Richard Pryor's appearance. Like, he was a big name back then, and they had it played up like he was a star, but he really just had a cameo appearance
right.
as Daddy Rich.
Right.
And he had his girls, the Pointer Sisters,
Yes,
with them.
were his contingent, yeah.
What do you think his role brought to the movie?
First, I'd say his name alone. You hear Richard Pryor, he was a megastar then. So people are, oh, Richard Pryor's in, it's going to be good, right? But I think his role was so appropriate in its length and in the meaning. He had tithe on his big gold Cadillac license plates. So he was the epitome of a preacher. I won't say a Black Baptist preacher because that'll be offensive, but what maybe the rest of the world perceived as Black preachers. Those of us who were in the community, we understand that was not typical, right? He was flamboyant, he was about the money, and he was not afraid to talk about that. And you know, he had his whole little posse that traveled with him, the Pointer Sisters. And so they kind of sang to people and talked about, you know, the church.
Yeah, made them feel good so they can give money. Because it was interesting when he had the Pointer Sisters sing, then he motioned to the chauffeur come out, and the chauffeur started passing the hat.
Yes. So it was always about the money. But I also think it was another way to show how Black men could have some level of success outside of the traditional scope of a 9-to-5 and not working for someone else. So he could be seen as an entrepreneur. You know, you could look at it that way because he had his own church, he had his own money, and he was doing what he wanted to do, and it looked like he was doing it with style and class and grace. And so they revered him, it seemed. They all swarmed around him. They wanted to hear what he had to say, except Abdullah. Except Abdullah was like, I see you for who you are, right?
And he knew Abdullah knew he was a fake. Because remember he said, if I wasn't Christian man, I'd come down there and beat you behind.
Yes. So he knew he was pegged. He knew Abdullah had him pegged for who he genuinely, authentically was. It was a show. It was a flamboyant show, and people found it attractive. But, you know, we're always going to have that in our society. We have lots.
Right. And it made me respect Abdullah's character even more because by challenging Daddy Rich, he was really concerned about the community.
Yes.
You know, you're taking their money, but you really don't have any, like, good intention towards them. Because, you know, the shoe shiner was like, oh, I love Daddy Rich.
Yeah, he gave him money.
Yeah, he gave the money back that Richard Pryor's character paid him. Yeah.
But that was all, you know, it was planned because he figured psychologically he's going to give me back my money. So I could showboat and act like I'm giving him some money and I'm going to get it right back. I just got to give another shout out to the Pointer Sisters, though, because they were hot back then. Yes, they were.
Yeah.
And they looked fabulous.
They did,
you know, you can look at the outfits that they wore in Car Wash. You could wear every one of those outfits today.
You sure could. Let's talk about the fashion, because you're a fashionista.
Yes, I love fashion. That's my fun space. So I channel some of it. You know, I got my big chain, my printed dress from the 70s.
Afro.
And my afro.
Yeah. And the bell bottoms.
Yes. And leopard prints, because, you know, leopard print was popular way back when.
Yes. And there was so many things I like about this movie. It's the fashion, and the music was phenomenal. I mean,
yes.
I Want to Get Next to You. We already sung that. But Car Wash was actually #1 on the music charts.
Was it?
When when the movie came out. So that was just...
It's a powerful song because you can play it now for generations and we will just dance because it sends us into a certain space, right? We hear the song and it's more than just the song. It's the memories that are connected to that song. It'll take you back to a point and place in your life, you know, and sometimes, you know, you just smile because you're like, wow, that seems so long ago, and you just remember certain things,
And it's interesting, my nephew, who's in his 20s, he hadn't seen Car Wash, but he knew the song. He said, Car Wash, that the movie associated with that song. So it's a song that kind of like permeates
generations. You're right, because my son, same thing. Avery has always loved music, though, probably more than any kid his age, but he knows the music of Car Wash, but he has never seen the movie. So I told him, I was laughing last night. I said, you should watch the movie. You would enjoy it.
I couldn't get him to sit down and watch it
No,
with me.
not yet. Not yet.
But I was like, you really should watch this
yes,
movie,
yes,
you know,
yes.
because it has so many messages.
It does.
You know,
It really does.
When it came out, like you said, it was just a comedy. We were able to see people like us on screen. You know, our favorites, like Richard Pryor, the Pointer Sisters were hot.
Yes.
But when you really dig into the characters, there's so many messages there.
There are, and the fact that it was so multicultural. When I was younger, I wasn't paying attention to that, but they had a Native American, Hispanic, white, black,
Jewish.
yes. I mean, it was really multicultural for the entire cast. And their stories were very different, you know, and it's just like all of these people working in this one particular car wash. Even the clerk had a story, you know. She was in love with the owner, but her story was she was looking for rescuing too, just like the prostitute. Except look at in times in life, you had a black woman and a white woman probably thinking the exact same thing. I would say probably maybe same educational level, but she was able to get a job, she wasn't. So forced into the streets. I mean, there are a lot of things there that you can really compare and contrast.
Pick apart.
Because in the end, they were both looking for men to save them.
Yeah, she was, because she was having an affair with the owner who was married.
Yes.
And then some suave guy came up.
along, and she was like, "Oh, I'm going to go on a date." Yeah. So she was searching.
Yeah, and he tricked her at, you know, it was at the end, which was pretty sad. But she was, just, like you said, she was just like the prostitute, looking for love, looking for a man to rescue her.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah, wow.
What's your thought about why they put the white woman who drove the Mercedes with the kid who was throwing up? I thought that was interesting.
You know what? It's interesting. I think they were trying to put a whole bunch of different types of characters in there. Because there's, in the movie version, they cut out a scene, some characters. Danny DeVito was in there.
Really?
Yeah, and he owned a restaurant across the street.
Okay.
And they totally cut out his character, his scenes. Now, I read somewhere that when they aired it on TV, they put his scenes in.
Really?
So I'm in the process of trying to find that to see,
That'll
you
be
know.
Interesting.
And his name was Joe. So I'm wondering if there's
that
connection.
was her Joe.
It could be a coincidence.
Could be.
But
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be, but I would probably say maybe they wanted, even if they wanted to allude to that.
Right.
His being present as Joe would make you think that.
Right. Well, everyone, that's our time for today. As you can see, Inez and I just absolutely love Car Wash. It's available on Amazon Prime for a nominal fee. You can rent it. It is hilarious. And until next time, consider yourself Blacklit.